He said he needed space from me, and then my own son blocked my number. If you've ever felt that kind of silence press on your ribs, subscribe and stay with me sometimes. The truth is the only revenge that doesn't ruin you. I wish I could say I saw it coming. I didn't. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, a fluke, a moment that would pass if I gave it room. I thought I could back away and love him from the hallway, and somehow that would be enough. My name's Denise, and this is Brooklyn Brownstone Stoops, the R train under our feet, and a wind off the harbor that smells like salt and metal. Soft piano before everything. Our Sundays were a kind of home. Evan would come by with a bag of sesame bagels and that anxious energy city kids carry, even when they're fine. We'd sit at my little table with its chipped edge and talk about nothing and everything, how the G still can. Tea commit, how the corner deli changed brands on the coffee, how Maya's firm was doing, and how she was learning to love a borough she used to call outer. Maya and I tried. We did. I learned her coffee order and remembered her sister's birthday. I didn't correct her when she called sauce gravy, even though my grandmother would have rolled in her grave. She laughed at Evan's old stories, touched his arm when he spoke, and I'd think, okay, we can build a life that makes sense. I split my time between my job at the library in Bay Ridge and my tiny apartment with the squeaky radiator and the best light at 3 p.m. Evan moved to Fort Greene when they got serious. He started sending me pictures of farmers market tomatoes like he'd invented August. I saved every one like a small prayer. The calm before the storm is always so gentle you mistake it for permanent. The trigger didn't look like a trigger. It looked like a boundary. She said it with that calm, educated voice that makes you feel coached. We're tightening our circle, she told me after dinner. Stacking plates like belonging was a chore chart and I'd missed my day. Therapist's advice, less outside noise, more focus on us. I said I understood. I do understand. Marriage needs privacy. I've been divorced since Evan was 10. I know what gets in the cracks. I started texting less, sending hearts instead of paragraphs. I waited to be invited, then my messages started to hang in that gray space that belongs to ghosts. I'd text, thinking of you, soup on if you want to swing by after work, and nothing. I'd send a photo of the sky over the Verrazano, a ridiculous pink, and nothing. Then I tried to call and got the sound that makes your stomach drop. This number is no longer in service. It was in service, it just wasn't in service to me. I called again and again, blocked. The app agreed. My son blocked me. The body keeps score in small ways. My jaw clicked. My fingers forgot how to hold a key. I stood by my window and watched the bus stutter down 3rd Avenue and thought, you're overreacting. Give it a day. People take space. Don't make it worse by making it big. Was I blind? Or just scared to see the truth? A week passed. I tried email because it felt less needy. Love you. Here if you need anything. Nothing. I walked past their building in Fort Greene like a cliché and hated myself for doing it. I didn't stop. I didn't buzz. I just looked at their windows to see if I could recognize silhouettes like a detective with less dignity. It was cold that day. The light was thin and mean. I bought a coffee I didn't want and warmed my fingers on the paper cup until it went soft. Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt the same silence, the kind that hums even when the city is loud. I started to rewrite history to make it easier on my heart. Maybe I'd said something thoughtless. Maybe it was that night I told a story from Evan's childhood and he looked like I'd handed him a mirror. He was on tea ready for. Maybe Maya actually did feel hated. That word buckled my knees the first time I heard it attached to me. Hated, it's a word you whisper to yourself in 6th grade about a mean girl. Not a word your son's wife hangs on your neck. I wouldn't know that for sure until later, but the shape of it was already in the room. The unraveling is not a single action, it's the small ways you start preparing to be the villain to keep your son. I started apologizing in messages I couldn't send. If I intruded, I'm sorry. If I smothered, I'm sorry. If I made you choose, I'm sorry. Guilt feels like productivity. It isn't, it's a treadmill. One afternoon, I ran into Maya outside Sahadi's on Atlantic. She was carrying a tote that said Good Bones and wore that beige that S, always expensive. Denise, she said like we were friends. I nodded. My mouth tried to smile. Everything okay? I asked, neutral. We're focusing on us, she said again, like a script. It's been a lot. Therapy is helping. She touched my arm. We'll reach out soon. It's the kind of sentence that doesn't carry a date. I went home and cleaned my sink like my life depended on it. A week later, a mutual friend DM'd me a photo from a bar in Williamsburg. Evan and Maya at a table, cocktails glowing like science, smiles pinned on. I zoomed in, because that is who I had become. Evan looked tired behind the smile, which I decided could mean anything, which is another new language you learn when you losing someone. You can read hope into any pixel. Then my neighbor Kia messaged me. Kia is younger than Evan, works part-time at the library, and remembers everything. She wrote, "Ms. D, can I ask you something?" I said yes, because I would have said yes to fire. She called me, her voice careful. "I'm not trying to get in your family's business, but I think you should see something." My back went straight. "What is it?" She said she used to work with Maya's friend at a boutique. They have a group chat, she said. "My friend sent me a screenshot for a different reason. I saw your son's name in it. I don't know if I should send it. It's messy, but it feels wrong not to." I told her to send it if it wouldn't hurt her. She did. It arrived like a door opening, and a floor relaxing, and the ceiling lowering at the same time. The screenshot was of a text between Maya and a contact labeled R, first initial only and then another with her friend, all bubbles and timestamps. The first message from Maya to the friend said, "Had him block her finally, couldn't stand the constant meddling. Therapist said boundaries, a line break. It's easier to keep him steady when he can't triangulate." I stared at that word like it could bite. In the other thread, 2R, her tone was different, light, edgy. "I'm free more now, no mill blow-ups to navigate. Same spot tonight." There was a pin, a hotel bar. I recognized because it has a rooftop view that makes people forget their names. Another scroll, in the friend thread again. "She hates me anyway." Told him that. He believes it. Easier. She added a laughing emoji, small and yellow and obscene. One screenshot changed everything. It wasn't the hotel. It wasn't the possibility of someone named R. It was the sentence. She told him, I hated her. She put that word in his mouth and then used therapy words like a permission slip to teach him how to forget me. My body went cold and hot, like I'd sat in snow and swallowed tea at the same time. I sat down on my bed because my legs didn't trust me. I read it again, then I printed it because paper feels more real when you've been gaslit by devices. But what I discovered next changed everything, too. At the bottom of the screenshot, there was a timestamp close to when I'd last tried to call. The block didn't come after a fight I could hold and examine. It came after a strategy. I didn't know how to hold that without turning into a person I didn't want to be. Rage is useful only when you can steer. I called Kia to thank her and asked if I could ask her to do nothing else. I don't want you in this, I said. You've already done enough. She said, I'm sorry, Ms. D. I said, me too, and meant it like a prayer and an apology and a promise. I took a shower to try to get my skin to fit again, and then I did something that felt like walking into a room where I might be shot. I wrote Evan a letter, not an email, not a text, a letter with my handwriting that looks like my mother's when I'm tired. I said, I love you. I will always love you. I am not asking you to choose. I am putting this in your hands because they're yours. If you want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I will survive. I didn't mention the screenshot in the letter. I put it in the envelope behind the note. I walked to his building with my kitchen timer in my pocket like a talisman. I left it with the doorman who knows me by my bangs. I said, please give this to Evan. He nodded with that gentle indifference good doormen use to keep a city from spilling. I went home the long way, down the side streets where trees reach for each other, and let the sun make lace on the sidewalk. I made soup because chopping calms me. I waited without pretending I wasn't. At 11:34 that night, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It's me, he said. His voice was the same and new. Can we meet? I said yes too fast and then pretended I hadn't. He chose a laundromat near Atlantic because he knows I like the sound of machines when I'm trying not to drown. We sat on plastic chairs and watched someone else's sheets tumble and tried not to look at each other. He took the envelope out of his jacket and put it between us like a pet he wasn't sure how to care for. I didn't know how to call you, he said, his voice small. I said, you didn't have to. You're here. He nodded, looked down at his hands, and then said, like he'd rehearsed, she said you hated her. He didn't look up when he said it. Hate is a heavy coat to put on your mother in July. Did I ever say that to you? I asked. He shook his head. I told her no. She said you didn't have to say it to think it. She said you were undermining us. She said you'd never accept her. The washing machine clicked to a new cycle, a small kindness. What did you think? I asked. I didn't think, he said, louder now. I felt trapped between you. I felt 12. I let that sit because it was true. Once I'd tried to be his whole net. It's hard to set down a job that made you both safe and stuck. I'm sorry, I said to the humming machines and the boy who used to breathe on my chest. He slid the screenshot back into the envelope like he could put the truth away. Whose are? I asked. Careful. He flinched. I don't know, he said, which meant he'd decided not to know yet. She said the therapy words. He said, softer, boundaries, triangulation. She said it was healthy to block you. He laughed without joy. It felt like cutting off my arm. We sat there in the smell of detergent and pennies and made a plan that wasn't a plan. He said he needed space from her, not me. He said he was going to his friend Nate's in Crown Heights for a few nights. He said he didn't want a fight at the apartment. I don't want to scare you, he said, but I'm scared. I put my hand on the metal chair and not on him because I could feel how much it took for him to not fold. You don't have to do anything tonight, I said. You can take a breath and pack a bag and leave a note and walk. He nodded. I don't know about the rest, he said, but his eyes did. He left, and I sat there a while longer because I didn't trust my legs to get me home without telling too many people. The collapse came quiet. I went upstairs and put my phone on my stove like it was a hot thing. I lay on my bed without undressing and stared at the ceiling where a tiny crack looks like a river. I cried the way you do when the crying is mostly relief and salt. The next morning, he texted from Nate's couch. I moved out. The day after, he wrote, I called a lawyer. The text after that said, I filed. I walked to the promenade and looked at the water and let the wind make my eyes water so I could pretend softness had some other source. I didn't dance. I didn't howl. I made tea and cleaned my sink and put the letter back in a drawer so I could remember my hands can write us home or write us out. He stayed in Crown Heights for 2 weeks while the city did its usual performance of being both tender and cruel. He worked, he ran in the park. He stopped answering her calls after the third night because listening was a punishment and a drug. He asked me to meet him at a coffee shop on Court Street, and we sat in 2 chairs that had seen 20 divorces and 5 reconciliations that week alone. He told me he'd found other messages, ones I didn't need to see. He told me he wasn't interested in punishing her. I just want out, he said. With the weight of a man who has been in a room too small for too long. He went to Kings County Supreme at 360 Adams and learned the language I'd hoped he never would. Index numbers, stipulations, service. He learned that even simple divorces are a math problem with feelings attached. Maya lawyered up fast. Her attorney sent a letter that made me sit down when he read it to me out loud. It was full of words that don't belong in mouths that love each other. Coercive, enmeshed, undermining. It remade me into a shadow puppet that could scare a child. Evan's lawyer told him not to engage. We stick to facts, she said. We keep it clean. He copied her cadence when he talked to me, which made me proud and a little sad. The court doesn't care about who smiled at dinner. The court cares about money and apartments and whether a lease has both names. This one did. He offered fair terms. He wanted his grandmother's dishes back and a couch he hated, and to end it without setting the neighborhood on fire. She dragged her feet and then clung. You're throwing away our future because of your mother, she texted him, and he sent me a screenshot not because he wanted me to fight, but because he wanted me to see what stories do when they run too long without air. He moved the last of his clothes out on a Wednesday with Nate and another friend, acting like it was normal to carry a plant you didn't. By down 3 flights of stairs. I stayed away because I know the difference between a clean goodbye and a crowd. He called me afterward and I could hear a sound in his voice that I hadn't heard since he was small, and woke from a nightmare and realized it was over. Then, nothing, for a week. The body rests when it can. I made a pot of black bean soup and froze half. I taught an after-hours class at the library about scanning old photos to people who still believe a picture can save you. I slept for more than 4 hours at a stretch for the first time in months. I saw Maya once more. She came to the library with a look like a polished shell. She picked a table without sitting and spoke to me like a woman who had practiced in the mirror. Denise, she said, I know you think you won. Congratulations. I looked at her hands because they tell the truth first. They were still. I don't think that, I said. I think we all lost something. She tilted her head. You told him I hated you, I said. Not loud, not soft. She didn't flinch like I thought she would. I told him you resented me, she said. It felt true. I nodded. Feelings aren't facts, I said. And I hated that I sounded like a mug. She smiled, small. He was always going to choose you, she said. You were just patient enough to wait until I made it easy. I breathed through that like a contraction and let it pass. He chose himself, I said finally. And he chose the truth when it found him. We stood there with a cart of returns between us and our reflections in the glass, looking like people in a painting about silence. I hope you build something good after this, I said, because I meant it, and because blessing a person who hurt you feels like deleting a file you don't want to keep anyway. She laughed, not unkindly. You're good, she said. I'll give you that. Then she walked out into the light that makes everyone equal for a second at the door. I would still be okay. It would hurt. It would be a wound with weather. But I would be okay because my life is bigger than the role I play in his. I realized I'd been auditioning to be the good mother for years. I quit. I'm just his mother. Sometimes good, sometimes loud, always here. Once, midway through all of it, I asked myself, was I blind or just scared to see the truth? Both. I was scared to see that my boy had grown into a man who could be fooled. I was scared to see that I am a woman who could be cut out of a story without dying. I am not blind anymore. I am not waiting anymore. I am listening. I am making my apartment a place that smells like cinnamon and Murphy oil soap and forgiveness. I am keeping my sink clean because it helps. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to love someone from the hallway and keep your hands by your sides while you waited for the door to open or stay shut. But what I discovered next changed everything again, in a quieter way. A month after the papers, I got a card. No return address. Inside, a note in a hand I recognized from wedding place cards. I'm sorry, it said. Not for the divorce. For using your love as a tool to get what I wanted. It was lazy and mean. You didn't hate me. I hated myself around you because you saw me and I didn't want to be seen. There was no signature. It didn't matter. I put it in a drawer with the letter I wrote him and the screenshot Kia sent and a picture of Evan as a toddler covered in spaghetti sauce. We make shrines to our worst day and our best day in the same place. That's how we learn to tell the difference. A friend asked me if I'd ever forgive her. I said I think forgiveness is a room with a door I can open and close. I opened it for a second when I read the card. I closed it again when I remembered the months my phone was a mirror that didn't know my face. Clean revenge is this. I told the truth to the only person who needed it. I closed my door. I didn't set anything on fire. I wasn't prepared to rebuild. Evan and I made dinner together last week. He chopped onions like they'd insulted him and laughed when he cried. He asked if I wanted to see pictures from a hiking trip he took with Nate upstate, and I pretended not to care as much as I did. We ate on the couch and watched the news on mute and looked at each other when a siren went by because that's what New Yorkers do. I went home late under a sky the color of forgotten dishes and felt so tired I didn't know what to do with it. I made tea and stood by my window and watched a man walk his dog with more patience than most people give themselves. I thought about the night my son blocked me and how it felt like a death. I thought about how one screenshot changed everything and how, in the end, it only changed what already needed changing. If you were in my place, would you have left? Or stayed a little longer? If stories like this remind you of your own, hit subscribe. I share the truths we don't say out loud. One screenshot changed everything for him. And maybe for me it just made me remember who I was before the silence tried to teach me otherwise.